Hey, how you doing? This is Adam Post, publisher of more than 1,000 comic books and marketing expert covering Lawfare judges panic, now try to block every move from the Trump administration. And when I say every move, literally, they really are going after every executive order, whatever they possibly can, to try to stop the administration. And as you can imagine, yes, they are going overboard and it's going to blow back on them. Nick Sorter just published on Twitter, for example. Breaking, President Trump is expected to sign an executive order mandating federal agencies work with DOJ to cut staff and limit hiring. Now, is that going to get a lawsuit trying to stop them from doing that? Of course it will. They're willing to do this. From Politico, this one just came out. Judge orders Trump administration to restore removed health agency web pages. The decision by U.S. District Judge John Bates came after a testy Monday afternoon hearing. And this is all the web pages on gender ideology. So if they're after this, they're after everything. But they know ultimately they're not going to win. From Vox, and that's as left as you can possibly get. Vox is like left of the Washington Post. Don't expect the courts to save us from Donald Trump. Courts are inherently reactive institutions. Trump always gets the first move. And from ProPublica, also another publication, very far left. The elite lawyers working for Elon Musk's DOJ include former Supreme Court clerks. Much attention has been paid to the young Silicon Valley engineers working for Musk's Department of Government Efficiency, but the group has also hired high-powered legal talent. Mike Davis is an attorney and he's an advisor to the president. Mike says this: President Trump isn't stealing another branch's power. Activist judges are stealing his executive power over political differences. This is unacceptable. These activist judges are creating a constitutional crisis. The Supreme Court and Congress must rein in these activities. There's a massive political dispute going on. It's open warfare in Washington, D.C. It's these establishment judges and the people coordinating these establishment judges versus the duly elected government. And why would we need DOJ in the first place? Kerry has a good point. Given what DOJ has uncovered in less than a month, one really has to wonder what inspector generals across the federal government have been doing all these years. Their primary function is to root out fraud, waste, and abuse, exactly what DOJ is doing. And while that occasionally happens, it takes years amidst relentless investigations into political appointees. IG should learn from DOJ and get back to the basics. And that was a response to Trump's tweet. Billions of dollars of fraud, waste, and abuse has already been found in the investigation of our incompetently run government. Now certain activists and highly political judges want us to slow down or stop. Losing this momentum will be very detrimental to finding the truth, which is turning out to be a disaster for those involved in running our government. Much left to find, no excuses. Trump's going full steam ahead. But what about the legal strategy? Great tweet from Kurt Schlichter, who explains he's a lawyer. What it looks like the Trump administration's plan is to deal with all of this nonsense from the judges. He states, here's a long take on the court injunction crisis, which is less crisis than an opportunity. Okay, stop panicking about all the stupid legal decisions from leftist judges that the left is getting from judge shopping in leftist jurisdictions. First, no one should be surprised by any of this. The administration certainly isn't. We always knew exactly what they would do. Do not take the fact that they're not screaming and yelling as them rolling over. They are not rolling over. There's plenty going on behind the scenes as administration lawyers prepare their papers for this legal fight to come. Second, since we have to have this fight, this is the time and the battleground to have it. Why? We want it settled right at the beginning of the administration so that we don't have to deal with this down the road. And we want to fight on these orders because, one, they're manifestly the result of bad faith judge shopping, and the opinions themselves are both procedural, and two, they are substantively ridiculous. They are legal jokes. Don't listen to the dummy lawyers on Twitter. Only listen to me or the people I tell you that you can rely on. Everyone telling you these are reasoned, valid legal decisions from the judges is either a legal illiterate or thinks you're stupid. Third, the way this fight is happening is to our advantage. Wait, you ask, we're getting decision after decision against us. How can that be good? Because they are leaving the Supreme Court no choice. People want Trump to sound off about this, but he doesn't need to. What's left unstated is the fact that he can just not obey these manifestly improper orders. They say it's a constitutional crisis now, but that becomes a real one when they push Trump too far. He's not going to submit forever to micromanagement of the executive branch by activist district court judges in blue cities across America. And Chief Justice Roberts knows it. Roberts and the majority of the court know these are ridiculous legally, and the last thing they want to do is stake the credibility of the court, which famously has no divisions, on this kind of nonsense. They're not going to jump on the grenade that is these decisions, meaning they're not going to support these ridiculous leftist judges on these decisions. They aren't good decisions. The Supreme Court knows there might someday be a fight with a president about something where he is legally in the wrong, but this is not that time. This is not the hill the Supreme Court will die on. Wisely, Trump's not adding fuel to the fire by threatening to do what is very clear he can do, which is disobey. This provides the Supreme Court the cover it needs to deal with these upstart district courts without looking like Trump strong-armed them to do it. So relax and let the process go forward. We're going to win on all these injunctions, and I expect fairly quickly. There's also been this debate at the Supreme Court about having to deal with these nationwide injunctions so that a judge in Rhode Island can tell the entire country what the law is and the law isn't. And these Democrat judges have been doing this. And they're not all Democrat judges. They're just all part of that club. Vice President J.D. Vance came out and made a very strong statement about these judges exceeding their authority. And Andrew McCarthy from National Review did a good study on this one. From the National Review, Vance is right about the limits of judicial restraints on executive power. The progressive Democrat histrionics over Vice President Vance's entirely correct observations that the judiciary may not usurp the power vested by the Constitution in the executive branch are nearly as hilarious as last week's histrionics over Doge. In case you missed it, progressives are suddenly very leery of unaccountable bureaucrats who wield supposedly unchecked power. Who knew? That would be the Doge boys. It's okay when they do it. Vance said, quote, judges aren't allowed to control the executive's legitimate power. But you didn't need the vice president to tell you that. The court occasionally tells you that. During the Biden years, a number of red states sued to attempt to make Biden enforce immigration law, in part by reinstating the Remain in Mexico policy. But a court has no power to force a foreign country to agree to something, let alone to direct the president to negotiate such an agreement. In a ruling against the states in Biden versus Texas, Chief Justice John Roberts, writing for the court's majority, wrote, Article 2 of the Constitution authorizes the executive to engage in direct diplomacy with foreign heads of state and their ministers. Accordingly, the court has taken care to avoid the danger of unwarranted judicial interference in the conduct of foreign policy and declined to run interference in the delicate field of international relations without the affirmative intention of the Congress clearly expressed. That is no less true in the context of immigration law, where the dynamic nature of relations with other countries requires the executive branch to ensure that enforcement policies are consistent with this nation's foreign policy. Of course, quote, it is emphatically the providence and duty of the Judicial Department to say what the law is, as Chief Justice John Marshall famously observed in Marbury versus Madison. But it is just as true that the Constitution does not make the Supreme Court the general overseer of our government. In theory, the judiciary is the least powerful branch because it only has judgment, not the purse or the sword. They don't control money, and they don't control the military. It is also the branch given the least responsibility for the conduct of government because in a free, self-determining republic, most federal decisions are supposed to be made by politically accountable officials, members of Congress, and the president, who answer to the people whose lives are affected by these decisions. So while the court can and should say what it thinks the law is, we must always remember that the justices are right because they are final, not final because they are always right. The High Court has in its history reversed itself on a number of significant matters, often because prior rulings were egregiously wrong. And the court has a doctrine, stare decisis, involving respect for precedent, a major aspect of which assumes that some decisions are wrong and wrestles with whether they should be retained nonetheless. If the court says what the law is in an area of the Constitution, commits to the control of another branch, the court's ruling should not be binding. If tomorrow the court decided the corporate tax rate should be 0%, it would not be Democrats screaming for the court to be ignored. And they'd be right, not because the court was wrong on policy, but because setting tax rates is a political responsibility, not a judicial one. This is all obvious. It's also very theoretical because, thankfully, the default position of today's Supreme Court is to resist judicial intrusion into realms the Constitution consigns to other decision makers, very much including the people of the United States. While Vice President Vance's hypotheticals were sound, the reality is the justices are not going to tell a general how to conduct a military operation or tell the Attorney General how to exercise prosecutorial discretion, which would be violations of separation of powers and hence unconstitutional. Complaining about Vance and President Trump, Democrats are doing a two-step. First, they worry rightly that as a pretext to do lawless things, an unscrupulous president could rationalize that his constitutional supremacy in some area of governance justifies ignoring court orders. Second, they maintain wrongly that courts must rein in Trump unless he take lawless action under the guise of his constitutional authority because, as they have the judiciary take as a given, Trump is an unscrupulous president, they say, and therefore he can't be trusted. But that's not how it works. Regardless of what you think of the president's scruples, he is the president and he is constitutionally supreme in such areas as foreign policy and setting enforcement priorities for the executive branch. A court has no business interfering with him based on fears, such as those of Judge Paul Engelmeyer, that he might disrupt norms. If there comes a point at which the president allegedly breaks the law, the court can rule on that. And if the relevant allegedly illegal action and the court's ruling on it involve an area that the Constitution commits to the president rather than the court, we can wrestle with the implications on a concrete record. And with the knowledge that it is mainly Congress, not the judiciary, that is empowered to counter executive excess, if there is any. In addition to all of this, the Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson, is a constitutional lawyer and he agrees with J.D. Vance. Speaker Mike Johnson says he wholeheartedly agrees with J.D. Vance's criticism of judges' checks on executive power. Quote, of course, other branches have to respect the constitutional order, but there's a lot of game yet to be played, according to Johnson. Let me know what you think of all this in the comments below. Always love to see your ideas. Please be sure you are subscribed to the channel. Click the bell for notifications, give me a thumbs up, and I'll see you again soon with another story. And if I don't see you, I will miss you. And if you'd like to support the channel and help me make even more videos, subscribe to the channel and become a paid member today.